Before a single lap of the 2026 season has even been completed, Formula One is already facing its first political storm. At the center of it, a single number, 16:1, the compression ratio written into the new power unit regulations. But behind that apparently simple figure lies a growing suspicion that one manufacturer may have found a way to stretch the rules without technically breaking them. The FIA has now triggered an emergency-style e-vote among the 5 power unit manufacturers to potentially change how that ratio is measured, not just at ambient temperature, but at 130 degrees Celsius under real operating conditions. Why now? And why the urgency before Melbourne? Some rivals fear a hidden performance gain could already be baked in. Others call it noise, but if this vote passes, it could quietly redraw the competitive map before the championship even begins. And here's the real question. Is this proactive governance or reactive damage control? Let me know your first impression in the comments. Is this smart regulation or political pressure? And make sure you're subscribed because this story is just getting started. Because what happens in the next 10 days could shape the entire 2026 power era. To understand the tension, we need to rewind to the core of the 2026 engine rules. The new regulations mandate a maximum compression ratio of 16:1, reduced from 18:1, and crucially, that measurement is taken at ambient temperature, with the engine not running. On paper, that seems airtight. In reality, that's where the gray area begins. When an engine is running, materials expand under extreme heat. At 130 degrees Celsius and beyond, tolerances shift, clearances tighten, and geometric ratios can subtly change. Some rival manufacturers, reportedly led by Audi, fear that Mercedes may have optimized its design to comply statically but edge closer to 18:1 dynamically. Now, before we go further, thank you for watching. If you enjoy this kind of technical deep dive, drop your opinion below. Do you think this is clever engineering or regulatory exploitation? And don't forget to subscribe for more F1 analysis like this. Because if this suspicion is even partially true, we're not talking about marginal gains. We're talking about a horsepower advantage that could define the early 2026 hierarchy. Here's where it becomes political. The 4 non-Mercedes manufacturers, Ferrari, Audi, Red Bull Ford, and Honda, have pushed for clarity before the season begins. Their argument is simple. If the measurement method only reflects ambient conditions, it ignores how the engine actually performs on track. And in a regulation cycle this tight, even a few tenths matter. But changing the rule immediately would have been explosive. An instant clampdown could have forced redesigns, destabilized customer teams like McLaren, Williams, and Alpine, and triggered accusations of targeted interference. The FIA clearly wanted to avoid that scenario. Instead, a compromise emerged. Introduce an additional mandatory test at 130 degrees Celsius from August 1. Not now, not before Melbourne, mid-season. That delay is strategic. It lowers the temperature politically, but raises another question. If there is an advantage, does Mercedes get half a season to exploit it before the correction arrives? The mechanism itself tells you how sensitive this situation is. Instead of calling another high-profile power unit advisory committee meeting, the FIA launched a 10-day e-vote. Quiet, procedural, but extremely consequential. For the rule change to pass, a supermajority is required. 4 of the 5 power unit manufacturers, plus both the FIA and FOM. In practical terms, that likely means Mercedes standing alone, unless the political winds shift dramatically. Logic suggests the 4 rivals will vote in favor of the 130 degrees Celsius test. Mercedes almost certainly will not, which turns the spotlight on the FIA and FOM. Their vote doesn't just settle a technical detail. It determines whether the governance model prioritizes stability or competitive parity. And this is where it gets fascinating, because if the governing bodies side with the majority, it signals that suspicion alone is enough to trigger structural change. But if they hesitate, What message does that send to the paddock about regulatory confidence? Inside the Mercedes camp, the tone has been noticeably calm. James Wowles dismissed the entire debate as noise, predicting it would disappear within 48 hours. That's a bold statement in a paddock that rarely forgets potential performance loopholes. From their perspective, the compression ratio interpretation is legal, transparent, and within the written framework. And technically, they're right. The regulation specifies ambient measurement. If engineers optimized around that, is it exploitation or simply excellence? But here's the tension. Even if the gain is small, early dominance shapes narratives. It influences development direction. It impacts sponsorship confidence. In a new power unit era, perception alone can alter competitive momentum. So when Wowles downplays the significance, is it genuine confidence or strategic deflection? Because in Formula One, the quietest garage is often the one with the most to protect. Red Bull's position adds another layer of intrigue. Laurent Mekies made it clear. They're not stressed if it goes left or right, but they demand clarity. That wording is deliberate. Red Bull Ford is entering its first season as an in-house power unit manufacturer. Stability matters. Certainty matters even more. Unlike established engine giants, Red Bull cannot afford regulatory ambiguity in year one of its project. A mid-season reinterpretation would complicate correlation data, development curves, and reliability projections. So for them, this isn't about blocking Mercedes, it's about locking the rules. But notice the balance in Mekies' tone. No accusation, no escalation, just insistence on definition. That suggests something deeper. This vote is less about punishment and more about future-proofing the regulation before the performance gap becomes measurable. And that's the ticking clock here. Because once the first qualifying session in Melbourne reveals the true pecking order, the politics will intensify fast. There's another dimension most fans are missing: timing psychology. By proposing the 130 degrees Celsius test from August 1, the FIA effectively places a countdown on the issue. If Mercedes holds an early advantage, rivals will measure every qualifying delta through the lens of compression ratio suspicion. That kind of narrative pressure can destabilize a championship before it truly begins. At the same time, if no clear performance spike appears, the entire saga risks looking like preseason paranoia. And that matters, because regulatory credibility is fragile. If the paddock starts amending rules based on theoretical gains rather than proven exploitation, it reshapes how engineers approach innovation altogether. Quick pause. If you're still watching, thank you. This is the kind of political chess that defines modern F1. Drop your view below. Should regulations anticipate gray areas or only react to proven advantages? And subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because Chapter 8 isn't about engines, it's about consequences. Here's the strategic reality. This compression ratio saga is not about one clever interpretation. It's about trust in the 2026 power unit era. If the supermajority passes and the 130 degrees Celsius test is introduced, the FIA sends a message that operational performance must mirror static legality. If it fails, Mercedes effectively receives institutional confirmation that innovation within written limits is protected. Either outcome shapes the political tone of this entire regulation cycle. And don't underestimate the symbolism. The first major controversy of a new engine formula often defines how aggressively teams push boundaries moving forward. Will rivals now scrutinize every tolerance, every thermal expansion coefficient, every clause? So here's the question that truly matters. Is this the end of a minor technical debate or the opening move in a much bigger 2026 power struggle? Tell me your verdict in the comments. Is this smart governance or early season gamesmanship?